On the morning of June 1, 2025, ordinary cargo trucks were moving along Russian highways. There was nothing unusual about them. Wooden cabins, the kind used for modular housing, strapped down onto flatbeds. The drivers had been hired weeks earlier for a simple job: hauling prefabricated buildings across the country. Routine freight, the kind of load that crosses Russia 1,000 times a day. Some of those trucks had driven thousands of kilometers, past checkpoints, past police, deep into the Russian interior, one of them all the way to Siberia, closer to Mongolia than to Ukraine. The drivers did not know what they were carrying. They did not know that, at a precise moment, a phone would ring and tell them where to stop. And they did not know that the roofs of the cabins behind them were about to open on their own. Because hidden inside those wooden sheds was something about to reach targets the Russian military believed were untouchable. Strategic bombers, some of them at Belaya in Siberia, more than 4,000 kilometers from Ukraine. Aircraft Russia no longer knows how to replace. This is the story of how Ukraine turned Russia's own size, its vast protective distance, into the thing that betrayed it. To understand why this worked, you have to understand why those bombers were sitting so far away in the first place. Russia keeps its long-range aviation deep in the rear, on bases like Belaya near Irkutsk in Siberia, Olenya up in Murmansk near the Arctic, Diaghilevo in Ryazan, and Ivanovo. The logic was simple and for years completely sound. Distance was the defense. Those airfields sat far beyond the reach of HIMARS, far beyond ATACMS, far beyond anything Ukraine was known to have. A bomber on a runway in Siberia was, on paper, the safest aircraft in the Russian Air Force. And that single assumption, the idea that distance equals safety, was about to be turned into one of Russia's most expensive mistakes of the war. That assumption is what Operation Spiderweb was built to demolish, because the bombers weren't safe because they were hidden. They were exposed precisely because they sat deep in the rear, lined up in the open, on bases that had never needed to fear a frontline weapon. Many were parked in the open, with too little close-in protection and no hardened shelters visible over the aircraft that mattered most. Why would there be? Nothing Ukraine flew could reach a runway in Siberia, so for 3 years of war, these airfields functioned almost like peacetime. Aircraft parked close together, fuel trucks rolling between them, the whole rhythm of a base that assumes the war is happening somewhere very far away. That is the quiet vulnerability distance creates. The further back you push something for safety, the more relaxed the people guarding it become, because the threat is always supposed to arrive from the other direction. Spiderweb didn't punch through Russia's defenses. It walked around them and arrived from a direction those defenses were never pointed. The setup took 18 months. Ukraine's security service, the SBU, assembled the drones quietly inside Russia, in a rented warehouse. President Zelensky said the operation was even run from an office near an FSB building, the very agency meant to catch them. And the most audacious part was not the hiding. It was how those drones would eventually get out. The drones were hidden under the remotely opening roofs of those wooden cabins, then loaded onto trucks and handed to civilian drivers who thought they were moving prefabricated houses. The people who actually knew the plan were withdrawn back to Ukraine before anything launched. Think about the patience that requires. For a year and a half, the most valuable targets in Russia sat behind bases guarded against the wrong threat, while the threat itself was already driving toward them on the highway. Then, on June 1st, the roofs opened. According to Ukrainian officials, 117 drones were used that day, hidden in container-like structures and launched close to their targets across multiple Russian regions. These were small Ukrainian-made quadcopters, the kind you could mistake for a hobbyist's machine, each carrying a payload of only a few kilograms. They rose out of the trucks, climbed, and turned toward rows of parked strategic bombers. And here's the detail that makes this feel almost impossible. The drones were remotely piloted, but the operation also reportedly used autonomy and AI-assisted targeting in some cases, helping them continue even when control links were degraded. Ukraine's engineers had trained the targeting system on decommissioned Soviet aircraft sitting in Ukrainian museums, teaching it to recognize the weak points of a Tu-95 by studying the real thing up close. The drones flew pre-planned routes using open-source autopilot software, the same kind of code hobbyists use. And when they lost their signal deep inside Russia, they didn't stall or wander. They kept going, finishing the route on their own. A weapon costing a few $1,000s, launched from inside Russia, using autonomy and remote control to reach some of the most valuable aircraft Moscow owned. The strikes themselves were precise, in a way that tells you everything about the intent. The drones went for the wings, for the fuel tanks, and structural weak points, where a bomber is most vulnerable. SBU footage shows a drone settling onto the wing of a Tu-95, right beside a cruise missile still mounted under it. When the tanks went up, the fireballs were enormous, which points to something chilling. Some footage appeared to show missiles still mounted under aircraft, suggesting at least some bombers may have been in a ready or near-ready state. Hit there, and the aircraft does not just burn, it comes apart. Now, if this video were like most of the coverage you have seen, this is where it would end, with explosions and a body count. But the explosions are the least important part of what happened. The real target wasn't the airframes, it was the system. If you are finding this breakdown useful, take a second to subscribe. Strategic Decoded goes deep on the operations and the logic behind them every week. Russia's strategic bombers, the Tu-95 and the Tu-22M3, are Soviet aircraft. They have been out of production since the Soviet Union collapsed. The factories are gone, and the supply chains that built them were scattered across republics that are now separate countries. Analysts at RUSY put it bluntly: lose one of these bombers, and broadly speaking, you lose it forever. Russia does not have the industrial base to build new ones. And once you understand that, the real damage of Spiderweb stops being about the explosions at all. So when Ukraine struck the bombers, the logistics behind them, and the readiness cycle around them all at once, it was not destroying equipment that rolls off a line next month. It was subtracting from a fixed, shrinking pool. That is the difference between a news cycle explosion and a structural blow. One makes headlines for a week. The other changes what an air force can actually do for years. And the effect shows up in how Russia fights. These Tu-95 and Tu-22M3 bombers are the platforms Russia uses to launch long-range cruise missiles at Ukrainian cities. Every airframe lost is one fewer launch platform on any given night, and one that cannot be replaced by simply building another. The long-term operational effect is still debated. The strike clearly damaged aircraft Russia struggles to replace, but it did not immediately stop Russia's long-range missile and drone campaign. When a tool cannot be replaced, you start using it like it is precious, because it is. Which brings us to the part most channels get wrong, and the part that matters most if you want the truth. How many aircraft were actually destroyed? Nobody fully agrees, and anyone who gives you one clean number is selling you something. Ukraine's SBU claimed 41 aircraft hit or damaged, around a third of Russia's strategic cruise missile carriers, with damage estimated at roughly $7 billion. That $7 billion figure is Ukraine's own estimate, and independent analysts have not corroborated it, so treat it as a claim, not a fact. US officials put the number lower, around 20 hit and about 10 destroyed. A senior NATO official gave a similar range, saying around 10 to 13 aircraft were completely destroyed. Visual analysis found at least 12 aircraft damaged across Belaya and Olenia, while satellite imagery analysis showed 7 destroyed bombers at Belaya alone. including at least 3 Tu-95s and 4 Tu-22Ms. So here is the honest framing. Ukraine said 41 aircraft were hit. Western officials and independent imagery analysts put the number destroyed lower, around 10 to 13. Both numbers point the same direction. A strike that did lasting damage to a fleet Russia can no longer build. There is another detail the rigorous sources caught. Of the 5 bases targeted, the confirmed destruction clustered at just 2, Belaya and Olenya. Satellite images of Diaghilevo and Ivanovo showed scorched grass, but little confirmed aircraft damage. One of the 5 trucks never even reached its target because its munitions detonated early on the highway. The operation was extraordinary. It was also not the total annihilation some headlines suggested, and being precise about that is exactly what separates analysis from hype. There are a few claims worth handling carefully. Footage showed drones reaching at least one A-50 radar plane, but the footage cuts out before showing the final condition, so that one stays unconfirmed. Russia's Tu-160 bombers were targeted too, but several analysts believe that fleet is largely intact, and Russia reportedly flew one just days later. Keep 2 facts separate. Russia reported no personnel casualties at the bases it admitted to. One civilian truck driver was killed by that early explosion, and several others were arrested. Now hold the cost of all this next to the damage. According to West Point's Lieber Institute and other sources, each of those drones cost roughly $2,000. $2,000 against bombers worth hundreds of millions each, sitting in a fleet that, by some estimates, saw as much as a fifth of its operational long-range strength damaged or destroyed in a single day. That is the inversion at the heart of Spiderweb, the cheapest weapon in the war, reaching the most expensive targets Russia owns. So step back, and the deeper lesson comes into focus. Russia's strategic depth, the thousands of kilometers meant to keep those bombers safe, was real protection against the front line. It was no protection at all against a threat that was already inside the country. Distance only works when the danger has to travel to you. Spiderweb proved that a determined enemy can simply move the launch point, and the moment it does, depth stops being a shield and becomes a trap, because everything is parked in the open, far from any defense that expected a fight. And that should worry more than just Russia. Every major air force keeps its most valuable aircraft on rear bases it assumes are out of reach, lined up neatly, lightly defended, because the threat was always supposed to come from the border. Spiderweb is the demonstration that the border is no longer where the threat begins. Dispersal and distance are not the same thing as defense. A bomber far from the front is only safe until someone decides the front isn't where they'll strike from. The uncomfortable part is how little it took. Not a new superweapon, not a stealth fighter, not a missile no one had seen before. Small drones, civilian trucks, open source code, and 18 months of patience. The technology was almost ordinary. What was extraordinary was the idea. The willingness to treat an entire country's interior as the launch pad instead of the front line. Russia spent decades building distance into its security. On one morning in June, that same distance is exactly what left its bombers undefended, lined up, and burning, an entire country away from a war they thought they were safely behind.